Hello everybody, welcome to this session where I'm going to talk about optimizing your energy, the two things that can affect everything. So your approach to activity and rest can affect your recovery from ME, CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, long COVID and related conditions. So if you are watching live, do just say hello, let me know you can see me and hear me. If you're watching the replay, just put hashtag replay. Let me know your thoughts about what we're talking about. Leave a comment. Your comment will help other people see the video. So let's get into it. So core problems that people face with these conditions. Number one, they tend to overdo things, and that results in what I call enforced rest. And so let's say you've overdone it, something I did many times when I had ME/CFS fibromyalgia. Now you're having to rest, and that can lead to restlessness and boredom. And this is counterproductive because if you are restless, then you're not getting quality rest. So we'll talk about some strategies for dealing with that. As I say, that boredom can lead to frustration. That can result in overdoing things, and then that, of course, results in enforced rest. So the pattern continues. So how do we avoid overactivity and enforced rest? What are the strategies for restlessness and boredom? How can we approach rest in a strategic way? And how can we approach activity in a way that is sustainable? I'll also talk about why rest isn't always what you need. And at the end, I will share a strategy called the step-by-step for success strategy, which can be helpful if you have a tendency to overdo things. So if you'd like the sound of what I'm talking about, if you'd like to learn those strategies, then give me a hell yes or a drop an emoji in the chat. Let me just see if I can see the chat. Here we go. All right. So, as always, tips I share, use your judgment and apply them in a way that works for you. And everything I'm sharing is shared with love, with the intention to help you move forward towards your goals. If you don't know me, my name's Simon Pimenta. I had ME, CFS and fibromyalgia for 8-9 years. I went from not being able to walk for 1 minute at times to being able to work full-time or to again live an active life. So Dorothy says yes please. So thanks for saying hi, Dorothy. So I did get an injury that slowed me down a bit, but life is still great. You know, I spent yesterday in the pub watching the Euros, watching England win in the semi-finals. So what helped me go from not being able to walk for a minute to being able to live an active life was mind, body and practical approaches. So I now create a lot of free resources, videos to help you move towards your goals. So do check out my playlists on YouTube where I cover a number of topics. So Dorothy says, I've watched all your videos. Thanks for letting me know, Dorothy. So let's talk about why rest isn't always what you need. Okay, now I've made 2 videos on the topic of rest. And one is, do symptoms mean that I need to rest? So do check that video out, and also a video on what rest is. So this video, do symptoms mean that I need to rest? I cover 3 things in a little bit more detail than I am going to now. So I will pop the link to those videos below this video. So if your energy is low, there might be times when you need strategic rest. For example, if you're dealing with a virus or you have experienced a lot of stress and you are feeling exhausted, then you might need to take some strategic rest. It's also important to recognize that there are times when actually what you need is some stimulation, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. So for example, boredom is a sign that your emotional brain needs something else, okay? And the third thing is that you may need to process emotions. So I'll give you an example of that. This week, my energy was quite low at the beginning of the week, and I could feel this tightness in my neck and spine, which is where I tend to get tightness, and often that's related to emotions of frustration and anger. And I realized actually that I was just feeling angry because I experienced some, what I would say is unfair treatment, actually 6 weeks ago. But I realized it was still kind of showing up in my body. And so, actually, instead of resting, which is what I might have done in the past, I actually got up, I got my little trampoline out, I jumped around, I shook, I made some noise, and actually, my energy changed. That tightness in my body completely shifted, and I felt more energized. Curiously, the next day I experienced the same thing. I was feeling that fatigue type feeling again. Again, I did the same thing. As I say, I'm not advocating you do this if that's not right for you, but I jumped up and down on my trampoline, shook my body, made some noise, and again, it shifted my energy. And even today, I was a bit tired because I had a late night because I was in the pub watching football. And again, I just got up and shook my body, got on the trampoline a few times, every time I felt tired, and actually I felt more relaxed and energized as a result of that. Okay, so that's just an example of working with my emotions and how it shifted my energy. And this is stuff I didn't know about when I first got ME/CFS. So let's talk about why rest isn't always what you need in a bit more detail. So I've been doing a course called Mind Body Reconnect, which was created by Claire Caldwell, who was a Mickle therapy practitioner. She was the head trainer, and she decided to create MBR because she felt that she wanted to add some more tools. She talks about there being two intelligences. There's our emotional brain and our thinking brain. Let's talk a bit about the emotional brain. The emotional brain has two roles. Okay, have a guess if you think you know what those two roles are. Have a guess, pop them in the chat. So the first role is that your emotional brain wants you to feel safe. Now, of course, if you're experiencing symptoms, you might feel safe when you're resting in bed. If you perceive activity as dangerous, for example, if activity results in symptoms, we can start to associate activity with danger and symptoms. We might need to unpick that a bit. For example, the symptoms might be due to overdoing it, might be due to, as I was saying just now, some stuck emotions. Dr. John Sarno talks about the fact that if we've ruled out structural problems, symptoms can be the result of repressed emotions. Okay, might be, as I say, overdoing it might be why you've generated symptoms. It might be stressing about thinking about doing an activity or doing an activity might be depleting your energy. So it's possible that actually, as I say, working on your emotions, working on generating calm in authentic ways, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. It might be that using the step by step for success technique can help create safety. So you can get the experience of doing activity and feeling safe. So that's the first role of the emotional brain, to keep you safe. The second role is to make sure you are fulfilled and living a fulfilling life. Now that's, of course, challenging to do when you have no energy and when you're lying in bed. So, and that those two roles, safety and fulfillment, might seem to be conflicting. So let's explore how we address that. The approach of MBR, Mind Body Reconnect, is that if you're not meeting your needs, the emotional brain will send you emotions. So, for example, feeling frustration. That's an emotion, it's a signal to tell us that we need to take action. If we don't listen, the emotional brain will turn the emotions up. And if we still don't listen, the emotional brain will start sending symptoms or sensations. an example of that is, and let me know if this is something you've experienced, getting a lump in your throat when you feel upset by something that's happened. Okay, certainly that's something I've experienced. I have talked before about the fact that at times when I was working, I lost my voice for weeks, and I realised on one occasion that I was actually really angry by some unfair treatment. So that is a signal that something's happening that we need to attend to and take action. And if we don't listen, the emotional brain will turn up the symptoms. So this can explain why it can be difficult to rest for a number of reasons. Number one, when we kind of stop, we haven't got distractions. This can bring up emotions. So we might experience feeling frustration, upset that we're having to rest, sadness that we're missing out. We might feel anger that it's unfair that we're missing out on life. Might lead, as I was saying earlier, to boredom. Okay, so that's the first thing. When we pause, that rest can bring up these emotions. And if we haven't developed the strategies to deal with those emotions, they are going to be very uncomfortable, and we're going to want to distract ourselves from those. The second thing is that those emotions remind us that we may or may not have the capacity to deal with those emotions. So our window of tolerance of that discomfort might be small, okay? When that happens, then we are more wanting to distract ourselves from that discomfort, okay? And that can result in stress. When we have a big window of tolerance, that means we can navigate those difficult emotions without going into distractions that might deplete our energy further, and that can support our healing. So we need to build our window of tolerance to those uncomfortable emotions. How do we do that? Well, I've talked about that in a number of videos where I talk about emotions, and I've created a playlist on emotions. Again, I will link the playlist to below this video. If you want it, if you're watching on a channel, I can link those videos on YouTube. If you're watching on another channel, comment playlist and I will, or emotions, and I'll share that playlist. Okay. So I go into more detail about how we build our window of tolerance in that video. So Dorothy says, I'm in severe relapse and totally incapacitated in bed. All my emotions are very high, but I can't distract as mentally and physically I'm too wiped out. So it's hard to lie there. So sorry to hear that, Dorothy. We're going to explore that in a bit more detail. I'd say do revisit maybe some of those videos where I talk about emotions and working with emotions. I'm really sorry to hear that that's where you are at the moment. All right. But consider some of the strategies I'm going to share as we go. Particularly as I've been doing so well this year. Yeah, sorry to hear that. So let's talk a bit about what to do when you are restless. So when you're feeling boredom, feeling restless, consider that restlessness isn't restful, is it? It doesn't help your body recharge, okay? It doesn't help your body heal. So when I had ME/CFS, there were times when I kind of felt to myself, I said to myself, I'm going out in a bit, so I am going to do my best to rest. But actually what I realised when I was feeling restless, that maybe I needed to change my strategy. So consider what you could do to alleviate the restlessness. Okay, is it that you need some stimulation? Is it that you need some connection? Is it that you need some movement? Obviously use your judgment, that might not apply to everybody. So my invitation to you is to do some little experiments, okay? So the first step is to brainstorm, to write a list. What are some things you could do to alleviate the restlessness, the boredom, the frustration, the other emotions, okay? Let me know in the chat. just give me a few ideas of what you could do. Some strategies that I might employ if I was feeling restless but was very fatigued is actually I might use my imagination. I might take myself on a little adventure in my mind. I might, when I was young, actually, I was very good at kind of creating stories, taking myself on adventures in my mind. So that's something you could do. All right, if you were really, unable to do much. There were times when I was so tired that actually all I could do was focus on my breath, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. Okay, because sometimes people say to me, I'm too exhausted to do anything. I say, yeah, but from what you're saying, you are actually generating quite a lot of stress because you're catastrophizing, you're chastising yourself. So if you've got the energy to do that, perhaps you've got the energy to do something a bit more useful. So Becky says, I drum, I hum, and I do yoga. So there's some great ideas. Okay, again, you have to use your judgment in terms of your capacity, but certainly humming is something you could play with if you're lying in bed. I've talked about this before, but I had a client who at the beginning of last year was in a really poorly state, and I just got her to, because she couldn't do much, I got her to clench her right fist, clench her left fist and release, clench her right foot, release, clench her left foot, release, and just do a few cycles of that to get her out of her head, to get her out of catastrophizing and creating all these scary stories, which is what she was doing. Okay, so let me know what would be on your list. Okay, top tip for you: being able to use the strategy of brainstorming, considering your options, is a really useful skill to have. And when working with people, it's often clear to me that people aren't considering their options. And certainly when I look back in the past, when I've made decisions that weren't great decisions, I realized I didn't consider all my options. So one thing I'd really encourage you to do is get really good at brainstorming, considering all your options. When we are brainstorming, we're writing down lots of ideas. We don't have to do them, but we're just coming up with ideas because some of those ideas might be relevant later on. Okay, and then you can choose. All right, you can say, okay, which of these am I going to do? So yeah, let me know, what are some strategies that you can do in your current situation? So Dorothy says, I imagine what I do if I win the lottery. That's a lovely idea. I go into my mind and think of the little games like the A to Z of things. Yeah, perfect. Girls' names, flowers, etc. So that's great, Dorothy. You're, using your imagination in a really brilliant way. Okay. For me, I know if I feel bored, restless, even actually when I had ME, there were times when I could do some gentle stretching or yoga as a way of just getting out of my head. And actually, that was a really good strategy for me when I had insomnia, wasn't sleeping very well. I'd get up, I'd do some stretching in the night, and that would help me get back to sleep. Okay. Now, I'd play the piano for a little bit or maybe go for a walk. But again, use your judgment in terms of what you can do. And then the second step is to take action. All right. You might do these things for a short period, maybe for 1 minute, maybe for 5 minutes. And notice what the result is. I was chatting to someone earlier today and they were talking about a strategy that they use when they feel restless. And they said when they do that, they notice that they feel more relaxed. Okay. So remember, I'm not advocating that anyone pushes through. What I am suggesting is that you just do gentle experiments that feel within your kind of safety zone. Okay, so use your judgment, discern when it's appropriate to do these experiments. But it is something that I found very interesting, that there were times when I felt what I needed was rest, but actually I needed some stimulation. I needed to work on some emotions, all right? So if you've just joined us, do check the beginning of this video where I kind of elaborate on some strategies that help me shift low energy. So how do we approach activity in a sustainable way? Well, I've made a playlist on movement, but it also applies to activity. It's on YouTube, so do check that out. All right, but I want to share this strategy called the step-by-step success strategy, which may be useful if you tend to overdo things. And when your body is in a stress state, in the sympathetic nervous system arousal, it can help you get into the parasympathetic nervous system state. And when people get into that parasympathetic state, their capacity for activity can change. For some people, I've had clients that their capacity to do activity has changed dramatically. You know, I've talked before about a client who came in a wheelchair on day one of the training. On the second day, she walked into the clinic, and I worked with about 16 or so people in wheelchairs, and all of them, barring two, actually got out of the wheelchairs. One sadly had cancer, and she did die sometime later, but she did say that she came to do the training because one of her neighbours had done it and just thought, I want some of that. And the other client, sadly, she died as well. But all the other clients actually got out of the wheelchairs. Some of them quite quickly, some of them it was more gradual. Okay. And this explains why some people do make dramatic change, because they shift from being in that sympathetic arousal state to the parasympathetic state. So let me tell you about this strategy called the step-by-step success strategy. So let's say someone's goal is to meet a friend at a cafe, and this is a goal that a number of clients have shared. Okay, let's say that goal is step 5. Okay, now what people often do is, let's say, as I say, step 5 is to meet a friend at the cafe. Actually, let's put that there. Okay, just make it a bit easier. Now, so that means that step 4 might be to just go and have a drink on their own at the cafe. Step 3 might be just to drive to, sorry about my shocking writing, let's try again. To drive to the cafe, okay? And get a takeout. And step 2 might just be to drive to the cafe. Step 1 might just be to go and sit in the car, okay? Often people, if that's their goal, to meet their friends at the cafe, they go to kind of step 4 or 5 when their capacity is low. And actually it might be useful to, just move that out of the way, to just consider whether you need to start at step 1 or step 2 or step 3, okay? So often people who are kind of adventurous and courageous jump ahead of themselves. And as I say, if your tendency is to kind of push yourself a bit beyond your current capacity, then just consider that if you take it step by step, how confident are you going to feel about doing step 5 straight away? If your confidence is 8, 9 or 10, then great, do it. If your confidence is 2, then we want to just kind of take a smaller step. You know, let's say your confidence to drive to the cafe and back is 8, 9, 10, then you can do that. All right. If your confidence to do that is, let's say, 6, and your confidence to just sit in the car for a bit is 8, 9 or 10, then maybe that's where you start. Okay, so consider that. We don't have to go to step 5 straight away. All right, so let me know, you know, what are your thoughts about that? How does that apply to you? Can you see yourself in that pattern that I've just described. Okay, so let's talk briefly about how to avoid overactivity. So I encourage people to identify their wildly important goal, or WIG for short. Okay, so let's say your wildly important goal is full health. Then step two is to so step one is to identify your wildly important goal and remind yourself regularly of your wildly important goal, especially when you're just about to do some activity, and to do that activity in the context of your wildly important goal rather than your mildly important goal. You know, if my mildly important goal is I want to do some tidying, I want to get this room tidy, then I can get fixated on that and maybe push myself to get the job finished, rather than saying, hang on, it's not aligned with my mildly important goal to keep pushing myself. It's better to just do some activity, then take a break, come back to it when I feel ready to carry on. Okay, so that's step one. Remind yourself of your wildly important goal. Step two is to get to know your triggers for overactivity. For me, it was frustration. It was being too strict on myself, trying to be really focused on recovery and squeezing the joy out of life. And then there's part of me that would react to that and rebel and just, throw caution to the wind, okay, and overdo things. Okay, step three is to use that step by step for success strategy, so that we don't get caught up in our MIG, all right, our mildly important goal. Step four is practical. Think about what practical steps you can take to help you stay, kind of in your zone of flow. If I know that there have been times when I just thought, like, for instance, if I went out to a pub or whatever, oh, I feel like I need to go home now. I feel like that's nice. And then the part of me would say, no, stay longer. Just use these mind-body techniques. And actually, I realized I just need to listen to that little inner voice that was saying, go now. You're feeling good, and you can go home. You can go to bed feeling good with a smile on your face. And I'd keep going. And then by the time I got to bed, I was exhausted. All right. So practical strategies. It might be just using a timer when you're doing activity. Step five is to use visualization. Connect to your WIG. Visualize yourself doing that activity, and when the timer goes off, for example, or when your body starts saying, okay, that's enough for now, just seeing yourself, just accepting that, being at peace, having that wildly important goal clear in your mind that at some point in the future you're going to reach that goal. Okay, so reminding yourself that this is part of your long-term strategy. So hope that's given you some food for thought. Let me know what your key takeaway is and what is one action you can take. As I say, I do create lots of free resources, videos to help you move towards your goals. So check out my YouTube channel where there's playlists on a number of topics. I also offer one-to-one and group coaching. And I also run a 12-week course called Building Resilience. If you'd like to know more about those things and what might be suitable for you, then I'm happy to have a free, no obligation chat with you. And just to say, I've still got one place for my course, Mind Body Reconnect case studies. Okay, if you'd like to know more about being a case study, there is a charge, but it's half of what I normally charge. Then put the word case below and I'll send you the details. And if you'd like to have a chat, we can chat further. So, as I say, I'd love to know what your takeaways are, whether you're watching live or watching the replay. Just let me know what your takeaways are, what your actions are. I see some other people have joined us, so do feel free to say hello. And maybe, if you like, we'll finish with a very brief relaxation. So let me know if you'd like a brief relaxation. Put a yes in the chat. And I really like what Dorothy shared in terms of using imagination. I'd love to know what thoughts you've got about how you can use your imagination in a resourceful way. I did get a request to do a guided relaxation on remembering a time where you experienced feeling healthy. If you'd like that, if you'd like me to post that, then I've recorded it already in a live session I did this morning. And if you'd like it, just put health in the chat and I will post that. All right, so I'm not seeing any responses. I maybe for those who are listening or watching the recording, if you'd like brief relaxation, you can stay. If you've had enough, then you can leave right now. So thanks for joining me. But if you are still listening, I invite you just to close your eyes. Obviously, only close your eyes if it's safe to do so. And I invite you just to take a breath in, breathing in through your nose, breathing into your belly and breathing out of your nose. As you breathe in and out, just allow your out breath to be a little longer than your in breath. When you do that, you're activating your parasympathetic rest and digest, healing state. So Dorothy says, yes, please. So I invite you just to breathe in and out, just allowing your mind, your body, your physiology to relax, soften and let go. I invite you to consider that there is a part of you that is wise. And that part of you has what I call supervision, the capacity to spot patterns. That part of you has the ability to recognize those patterns and to problem solve, to find solutions. As I mentioned earlier, a really useful skill to cultivate is brainstorming, considering your options. Walt Disney, when he was creating ideas, he would allow himself to have a day where he just came up with ideas. He didn't judge them. He didn't reject anything. He just came up with lots of ideas. And then the next day he would go through his ideas list and circle the things that he thought had merit, discard the things that he didn't feel at this time were useful. And that's how he came up with the idea for Mickey Mouse. So consider that, our ability to explore our options in a creative way, coming up with as many ideas as we can, even if they are outlandish. And then choosing an option, and then most importantly, taking action. I encourage people, if they want to embed a new behaviour, practice it every day. So for example, you might practice setting a timer off, and when the timer goes off, just reminding yourself, by pausing in this moment, it's safe to do so, and just to allow your mind and body to be at peace with that, knowing that you are investing in your future by just taking those little breaks, changing your activity. Consider when you do need to rest, when it's useful to do that, but consider when it's also useful to do that kind of emotional work I was talking about earlier, or when you need some stimulation, some fun, some connection. So I invite you just to learn whatever you need to learn from that experience and from this video, and think about what action you can take. And it's fine if you take small steps. Got any questions, then feel free to get in touch. Otherwise, I'll say thanks for watching, thanks for your participation, always wishing you great health. Keep going, you've got this. Bye for now.